I am certain the Secretary is committed to the advancement and availability of biotech products. The Act does not authorize regulation on the basis of rhetorical concerns advanced by activist groups. It's important to note that nowhere in the Organic Foods Production Act has Congress limited access to organic producers to the advantages of agricultural biotechnology.
Because some folks apparently will use every tool possible to try to shut down biotech crops. And if the only answer to the alfalfa question is one that leads us right back into the courtroom, then I'm not sure how that benefits biotechnology in the long run. So it just appears that you gave our opponents ammunition.
I need to state clearly and emphatically, I have no doubt about the safety of the products our regulatory system at USDA has approved. Every interest engaged in the conversation shares the goal of protecting the right of every producer to grow on their land what they believe and decide is best. Every interest engaged in this conversation, to my knowledge, recognizes the fundamental property right interest inherent in this discussion. The rapid adoption of GE crops has coincided with the rapid expansion of demand for organic and non-GE products, resulting in real practical difficulties for some non-GE producers to meet the needs of their markets.
I promise you a series of, I hope, relatively painless questions. How many biotech varieties have been fully deregulated by USDA, approved without any of the coexistence restrictions? How many of those varieties contain a similar glyphosate tolerance gene? And is it correct that each review of the currently available Roundup Ready varieties were determined by USDA to be substantially equivalent? And is it correct that each review of the biotech alfalfa product conducted by USDA has concluded that the product is substantially equivalent to conventional alfalfa?
Issues have been raised during this discussion about the purity of seed and whether or not there will be, in fact, an assurance that we will continue to have purity of seed, so that anybody who wants to do organic, anyone who wants to do identity preserved non-GE will always have that option.
Does it concern you that if ultimately the segregated concept is what the department decides to do, does it worry you what that does to our decades of pursuing our trading partners and our friends around the world, that if you use sound science, if you follow established rules, that these products are absolutely safe and that this segregation business is not necessary? Does that cause you some personal angst? You've obviously been a biotech guy for decades.
Recently, there have been questions about the comprehensive nature of those assessments.
That the partial deregulation option presented by USDA will have a much broader impact on all of U.S. agriculture, our international negotiations, and further development of these important products. Please explain your thinking on how a partial deregulation alternative would promote these mutually stated goals. I promise you I'm not Perry Mason, but I do appreciate your answers.
Do you think that these folks that are opposed to biotech, that sue, do you think they picked on sugar and alfalfa because they're small crops and they're easier to pick on? Do you think that was...
I wouldn't know the motivation and wouldn't want to question the motivation of anyone involved in this representation.
Do you think you have the authority to implement option 3?
I think that the statute indicates that we have 3 decisions that can be made with reference to any petition. One is to say we're going to continue to regulate it. Another is to say we're not going to regulate it at all. And the third is we're going to deregulate it in part.
So at this point, the department, you don't think that you need any additional authority, or that this committee needs to be involved?
We've got to figure something out to continue to do what we need to do and what we're directed to do under NEPA and what we're directed to do under the Plant Protection Act. We have got to figure out a way to do it more quickly.
Would you be willing to work with this committee to look at legislative solutions? I've been a supporter of biotech for a long time. I've been out to the gentleman from Illinois district and looked at some of the amazing things that the company in his district is doing. We're mixing a marketing issue of the standards different industries have regarding the level of AP that is acceptable in their alfalfa crops, basically concerns of the organic industry. When the safety issues have been addressed, we should not hold up farmers who are dependent upon being able to plant during the spring planting period from being able to move forward and do that. And I think that's the problem.
Just to be clear about this, the time period we had to wait, by our rules and regulations, we had to wait at least 30 days after the final EIS was submitted. This 30-day period is still still running and will expire on the 24th of January.
But we could act then and still be in time to plant crops. I am the new chairman of the Antitrust Subcommittee in the Judiciary Committee, and I've been watching the antitrust hearings that your agency has conducted with the Department of Justice. You focused one of those hearings on the seed industry.
To me, it seems pretty obvious it's the only way we're going to be able to feed the world.
It's also an issue relative to the environment. I think there's genuine concern about water quality, genuine concern about issues concerning soil, and biotechnology is one strategy that we are looking at to reduce the amount of pesticides and chemicals that are required in order to continue to have the productivity.
That you believe that the department has statutory authority to regulate plant-based biotech crops. Can you specifically point to the portion of the United States Code that gives you that authority?
CFR Part 340, Section 340.6.
Which provides?
Essentially indicates...
Not essentially, it provides what?
It directs the department to have one of three options that it considers.
When we go home, as we are in about 25 minutes for the weekend, then the government's controlled by people who are unelected and whose statutory authority is somewhat questionable. So I do question that authority. CFR is not statutory language, Mr. Secretary.
It's the Plant Protection Act.
Well, what you quoted for us was not statutory authority. It was regulatory action. And that's my very point. But I think this body, and not unelected bureaucrats, ought to be the people who are making those regulations and laws for American agriculture.
Congressman, I'd be happy to provide you portions of the Plant Protection Act under Subtitle A, Section 411, and others. We'd be happy to provide that to you.
Scientifically proven safe technology.
GE alfalfa is utilized, and as its use is expanded, will we get to a point where that will, at some point in time, today or tomorrow, jeopardize the ability to have seed to produce organic or non-GE?
How does that echo across through Europe, where we're constantly seeking to export our products in there? And I have charged them myself with using that as trade protectionism. As I observe what has gone on in Europe with the GMO protectionism there, it looks to me like it was started out to be a political movement that wasn't based on sound science. The economic impact of not having a clear-cut, I'll say, approval rule for GMO alfalfa, in particular Roundup Ready.
We do it in a way that doesn't necessarily overtax our capacity, our water resources, which is also an issue, and doesn't compromise our ability to have clean water with pesticides and chemicals. On the other hand, there's also a recognition of the economic impact that if we don't do this well, that those who are producing non-GE crops for export, those who are producing organic crops for domestic and export consumption, may also be harmed. So it's a process where there are economic analysis on all three areas.
That would tell us that if there was no conflict between GMO alfalfa and organic alfalfa, if there happened to just be no conflict, what's the potential economic improvement that we would have from the increased production in the GMO alfalfa if it could be raised any place where it were chosen without an impact on the organic? You'll be aware of press reports of the Deputy Secretary Kathleen Merrigan and her record and the way she is viewed as having been instrumental in obstructing the approval of bioengineered veterinary drugs and also in preventing the inclusion of genetically engineered crops under the organic rubric.
We talked about the economic impact as it applies to farmers, but what about the economic impact as it applies to the investment in biotechnology? As we see, if these products become less appealing to farmers and therefore their value goes down, are we going to see a disruption in investment in the biotechnology community?
Sure. Please begin.
It is clear that USDA is obligated, in our opinion, to unconditionally deregulate the crop, the alfalfa crop, and has no authority to impose these arbitrary restrictions as suggested under their preferred option 3, in their words. One of the terms we've heard a lot over the last several months is coexistence. Coexistence with respect to biotech crops, as has been stated, Mr. Chairman, is indeed a marketing issue. It is absolutely not a safety issue. And in this case, as I have pointed out, impact their bottom line profitability. We must remember that we are working toward the use of biotechnology in a manner that promotes continued opportunity, profit-making opportunities for all of our farmers. Our WTO case was won very strongly against the EU on the basis that these are decisions based upon safety and soundness, based upon environmental impact, not based upon in any way a precautionary principle of any kind, not based in any way upon consumer preferences of any kind, based upon safety, soundness.
The EU has long been an advocate for including the so-called precautionary principle in international agreements. Are there similarities, as you see it, to be drawn between the debate about coexistence and the precautionary principle?
I think so, Mr. Chairman. The precautionary principle is really a manifestation, if you will, of policies where politics trumps science.
So I guess, Chuck, the question then becomes, in your opinion, and you've been around this process a little bit, you have a little understanding, a little history, observation. If USDA decides on deregulation with conditions under so-called option 3, will the United States in effect be defending the precautionary principle in the future? Will we be defending what we have argued against for decades, I guess is really the point. The U.S. government invests significant resources towards outreach in the developing countries to assist them in developing functional, science-based regulatory systems. What impact do you anticipate in countries that are beginning to see the value in agricultural biotechnology if the USDA regulates biotechnology products based on, I guess the polite phrase would be, socio-economic concerns rather than plant-pest basis?
All over the planet has now grown, we believe, in 25 countries. I am advised over 335 million acres. And we, again, are going to need these products grown all over the planet. Once they have completed all of the process in terms of the assessment of the safety of these products, which they have on Roundup Ready alfalfa, I do not believe that they have the regulatory authority to do anything then other than just simply deregulate the product.
You heard my earlier statement about that I am a longtime supporter of science and biotech. At the same time, across the country, in my state and other places, the farmers market, the interest in organic food and so on has really exploded.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I just wonder if we see a need here. It seems like that we almost see people developing sides. I don't think maybe there doesn't need to be a side. Maybe we need to figure out how to facilitate communication.
Well, the gentleman, as always, from Iowa, was full of wisdom and good ideas, and that's, I think, a part of our agenda on this Ag Committee is to address the needs of all agriculture.
Yeah. I go back to Secretary Vilsack's statement, and I hope you share my belief that farmers, ranchers, growers are in the best position to decide what is best for their operations.
The interesting thing is that the Secretary said all the right things and very political about everything and hugged all sides and those kinds of things, but at the end of the day, if he pulls the trigger on option 3, then that last statement is inaccurate. How much of this is a definitional issue? In other words, from a scientific standpoint, is the milk coming out of a cow that's fed organic alfalfa versus Roundup Ready alfalfa, are there any minute differences chemically in that milk that's discernible?
No, I mean, from a chemical point of view, no. From the point of view of the organic standard, which is a process-based standard, I think that there might be some issues if you could call that milk organic. But from a safety chemical perspective, no, there's no difference.
Okay, so and USDA sets the standards for what is and is not organic, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if I would expect that 100 years from now, genetically engineered seeds, as an example, will be the new organic. Should there be a suggestion that USDA look at the standards for organic, given it's just really a marketing issue and not a health and safety issue, that USDA should look at those standards to see if it really does make sense? Are we hung up with on just the phrase organic, meaning something that we grew ourselves in the backyard with whatever? Is there an opportunity to have that conversation at some point?
Clearly, we have a lot of work ahead of us.